Welcome to this second part of end-to-end data pipeline for Apache Iceberg on HPE Ezmeral. So last part we came up to the point of airflow jobs that we have created. So now we will go and launch the Spark streaming consumer job, and we will trigger that from airflow. So the way we have written this DAG is with a bunch of parameters. So we are going to enter values for these parameters, and then we kickstart the DAG. So once the DAG starts running, we go and check the logs of the current execution. And you can see that the DAG is starting up, and it is going to create a Spark streaming job on Ezmeral Spark on Kubernetes. So you can see that it is in the process of launching that job. So let's go back and check the Spark section, and we can see that that job is actually started. So it's a Spark streaming job that has started, and from airflow perspective we are able to see the logs from that job. So we can see that the Spark is executing our code, which we talked about last time. So we are able to see output from our code, so such as the schema that we print out for the Kafka, uh, as well as the specific Kafka broker that we are connecting to, and any kind of data ingestions, etc., that happen. So all of that will be visible here in the log, and we'll be able to see how the Spark streaming consumer does its job. So when we keep running it, and when there's no more data to be processed in the Kafka, then the consumer will start giving us a info message, which basically tells us that the consumer is waiting for new data. But it will keep coming. It will just keep running until you explicitly delete. So it's a job that will keep running forever, um, as a consumer on your Kafka, right? And you can see that it's running. And if I go, I can see that it's been running. Now it's running for almost 11 minutes that I have kept it running. And subsequently, I'll show you when I run it for quite a long period of time. So this is how the consumer operates, and it will basically keep ingesting data, right? Okay, so now we want to go and see another capability. So we do run a Spark history server within Ezmeral. So within Spark history server, when we go to the incomplete jobs area, we'll be able to see that the current running job is listed there. And if I click on it, I can see that what are the Spark SQL data frame operations that have been done, and I I can subsequently also see the structured streaming component being tracked. So if I go here, I can basically, so it's I can see that there's one active streaming query, which is my current query, and then this area will keep updating as different batches come. Some KPIs are tracked, right? So This is one area where people can go and see what's happening with their Spark streaming jobs that are running. Okay, so so now we want to see how to use that data. So we saw that we are running a consumer which is ingesting the data and putting it into Iceberg data warehouse. So how do we access it? So we have connected our Presto query engine from Ezmeral to the uh, data warehouse, Iceberg data warehouse. So let's go back and check where it is. So you can see that on my Ezmeral data fabric object store, I have the bucket Iceberg data, and that particular bucket is connected to Presto via Iceberg connector, and so you are able to see different schemas and tables from that Iceberg warehouse. So let's go check out the bucket. So when we see the bucket, there is this warehouse directory underneath. You can see those two schemas, and if you go back to Presto, you'll be able to see that those exact two schemas are showing up in Presto, right? And if I go back and go into one of those schemas, then I have couple of tables that I see. So if I go back and check those two schemas, then I can see that those two tables also exist in my warehouse on object store, right, which is hosted by Ezmeral data fabric. So that's how I can access, and then from Presto I can basically access it as a table. I can see the schema, I can see data preview, etc., right? So it's accessible now for my query engine. Let me go and now run some queries against it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the counts in my Kafka ingested Iceberg table. So when I run the query, I can see that it has a certain set of counts. So that helps me set a baseline because I'm going to generate some additional data and going to ingest further data. So then we'll be able to see the count increasing. Then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to see if I can do a select, but anything I do from UI is automatically locked to maximum of 1000 rows. So if I don't specifically have to add a limit, but I'm adding a limit of only 10 rows. So I just run it, and I should be able to see that those 10 rows that have come from my Iceberg table, right, that I ingested from Kafka via Spark streaming, right? So it's all happening. Spark streaming is running. As soon as the data comes, it will get ingested into the table, and then I should be able to quickly see the change in counts and data in the table, right? So it's live table basically. And then I can also see what happens in the table in terms of snapshots. So one of the unique things about Iceberg table is that I can look at different snapshots. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to get a list of all the different snapshots in the table at the moment, and once it runs, I should be able to see a list of all the snapshots. Okay, so if I see, I can see it has a bunch of snapshots already created, and of course, every snapshot will be a child of its previous snapshot, and you have some timestamps and all that. So this is a key element of Iceberg tables, that it allows you to do time travel. It allows you to go back to time in time and look at what was the condition of the table, right? So I'm going to now pump some additional data into my Kafka. So I use the Kafka Python record producer that I discussed in the part one. So it's a Python producer. So as soon as I go and launch it, I will see some logs coming up. So every time I run this, it will generate 100 new records, and then it will pump those records into the Kafka. So that's what it's doing. So it has generated the records. I can see them printed out in the log. And if I want, I can record a specific ID, specific name, specific address, and then I can go and check from Presto whether that record is showing up or not. So that's always possible that I can do. So now if I go back to my consumer, as you can see that it has processed a batch, a mini batch or micro batch as you would call it. It's a streaming window basically, and it has processed the 100 records that showed up on Kafka. So it has almost instantaneously processed the records. So you can see that in the structure that it prints out in the log, I can see that there were 100 records that it got, and it processed them and added them into my Iceberg table, right? And those were coming from the Python producer, right? Kafka producer. Now if I go back to my Presto, and I can notice that my record count what it was previously. So let me now run my record count again. So if I run my new record count, I should see that it is higher by 100, and that's what I observe. That I have ingested all those 100 records, and they are live in my table, right? And I can immediately use them from my Presto query engine. The other thing I can do is I can go and check the snapshots in the table. So once I run this, I should see there should be one additional snapshot added for the new records that I appended into the table. Okay, and that's what we see. That we see that there's one new snapshot that has come up that got added as part of this recent data ingestion that happened from Spark streaming, right? And as you can see, it's a live table. I can use the table from Presto, while in the backend the Spark streaming job is running continuously, and it's up, as data shows up, it's adding the data into the table, right? So it's a live table that I'm using. So I can also use one of the snapshots and see what was the state of the database at that point in time. So that's called time travel. So basically, I'm just running a query to check the status of the table at a particular snapshot. So that's the first snapshot in the table that I'm selecting. So my expectation is that the table should be very small at this point in time. So let's just try it. So you can see that it does show me a set of records. I can also do a count on it just to get a sense of how many records were there at that point in time. So let me just do that and change it to count. And I can see that at that time I had only around 200 or so records in my table, right? And at the moment I have 800 records. So with snapshot, I think I can go back and see table at a particular point in time, and that's actually quite a handy feature when it comes to uh, for example, model training, right? So you may want to reproduce your training exactly as you did, so you want to preserve the snapshot and then go back and reproduce your training results. So all of that you can do it very well. So now you can see that I have been running the Spark streaming job for almost 2+ hours at this point, and it will keep telling you when it processes any incremental data that is coming on Kafka, whenever it's just waiting for data. So all of that info keeps coming into the logs, and we are using centrally Airflow as a easy mechanism to manage all these jobs in a central place, right? So now the other thing we want to do is to feed a real-time dashboard, right? So this is the superset from Unified Analytics, and we do have a real-time KPI dashboard. So let's just see where it is connecting, right? So if I go back and look at my Presto, I see this Iceberg connector, right? So if I go here, I can see that there's this Iceberg connector to that particular S3 bucket, and that's the one that I'm connecting. So if I go back to my superset and select that, then I should be able to see the same schemas. So if we give it a few seconds to refresh, you can see that I see both the schemas that are present in my Iceberg data warehouse. So if I select the default schema, you can see that it shows me the exact same tables that are there in my Iceberg warehouse, right? So we are connected to that same Iceberg table that's being ingested by Kafka. I mean Spark streaming, right, from Kafka, and that's the one that's connected to Superset, and that's the one that I'm using for my real-time KPI dashboard. So I'm just tracking very simply the number of records, the average of the amount column and the sum of the amount column, and I'm just gonna refresh the dashboard periodically. So as soon as new data shows up in the Iceberg data warehouse, it will be read automatically by Presto, and the Superset dashboard will be automatically refreshed, right? So it's a live real-time dashboard that should show me new data as it is coming up. So to show that it is working, I will need to, so obviously there's no new data at the moment. So while the refresh is happening, the numbers are not changing, right? So they'll remain what they are. So let me now go and create some additional records, right? So I go and kickstart my record producer. So I start it, and then I go and look at the logs, and I should be able to see that I have 100 records being generated. So every time I run this, it will create 100 new records and add them to Kafka, right? So it's running. And you can see that yes, it has created additional 100 records, right? So now I should be able to see my number of records increase and my other KPIs change. So so let's just monitor this dashboard now. And what my expectation is that 800 number of records should go up to 900, right? Because I just added 100 records into Kafka, so they should be ingested by Spark streaming, they should be added into an Iceberg warehouse, they should be read by Presto, and Superset should get it from Presto and update it, and that's exactly what happens. So you can see that the new records have entered our Iceberg warehouse, and I can see my record count increase as well as my KPI numbers change because of those new records that have come into the Iceberg data warehouse, right? So we just let it refresh for a few more times and make sure that there's nothing coming in, because of course there's no new data. But now let's just go and do one more time the same thing. So let's just go back and do one more record generation for 100 records. So let's just pump additional 100 records into the Kafka topic. So as you can see, it has the producer has created 100 more records. And now let's go back and see if our dashboard picks it up. Again, the records will be read by Spark streaming consumer, return into Iceberg data warehouse. Presto will read it from Iceberg data warehouse. Then Superset will use Presto to get that data, and then Superset updates the dashboard. So let's just see if all of that happens. So now you can see that the record count went to 1000, 1K. So indeed the incremental 100 records are in our Iceberg data warehouse, and they have been picked up by our dashboard. And our dashboard has already refreshed KPIs in the dashboard accordingly, right? So we do have a dashboard that's real time, that picks up data as it comes in from streaming, and it does show us updates as they happen, right, in real time. So that was the part 2. Thank you, and move over to part 3 to see the rest of this demo. Thank you.